During the awakening ceremony, everyone laughed at you for unlocking the weak assassin class. But suddenly, the system alerts. You unlock the ability to steal any talent or attribute within the 2-meter radius. But that's not enough. He also unlocked 2 more broken abilities called Weapon Master and Insight. That concludes the intro, and let's begin. Blue Star, a parallel world to Earth, serves as the stage for this manhwa story, where a mysterious game called Dawn descended over 100 years ago. With its arrival, monsters, bosses, and even demons from the game began posing a constant threat to the world's safety. To survive these ever-looming threats, humans are forced to awaken their professions, fight monsters, level up, and grow stronger. Currently, the awakening ceremony is in progress, with hundreds of students gathering at the grounds, all brimming with excitement and determination to awaken unique and powerful professions. Wang Tianxi, exuding confidence, steps onto the awakening platform, clenching his fists as he prepares to awaken his profession. To everyone's amazement, he awakens the coveted Holy Knight profession, drawing cheers, and flaunts his confidence by slicking back his hair, basking in glory. The instructor, however, interrupts the moment by sternly ordering Wang to leave the platform so others can have their turn. After Wang steps down, the instructor checks the list and calls Zhou Yi, the protagonist, to the awakening crystal. With steady steps, Zhou approaches the awakening crystal, placing his hand on it, causing a surge of dark energy to erupt and granting him the assassin profession. As the stat system materializes before him, Zhou's expression seems conflicted, almost disappointed by his assigned profession. Among the crowd, a large and muscular student mocks Zhou, sneering that the assassin profession would be useless since Zhou lacks skill with weapons. Zhou overhears 3 students whispering and ridiculing him further, predicting that he will struggle to grow stronger. At that moment, Zhou notices the system panel shifting, revealing a new skill called Insight, which can expose an opponent's weaknesses. Shortly after, he unlocks another ability, Hand of God, an active skill capable of stealing a target's items, skills, or attributes, leaving Zhou both amazed and bewildered by its outrageous potential. To top it off, the system grants Zhou an exclusive passive skill called Weapon Master, which allows him to wield any weapon without limitations. Encouraged by this, Zhou envisions himself as an assassin wielding a powerful 2-handed sword. His thoughts shift back to the Hand of God skill, which he believes could become his ultimate cheat code for becoming unbeatable. A teacher approaches Zhou, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder, encouraging him not to let the opinions of others discourage him. Zhou, however, calmly waves off the teacher's concerns, expressing genuine satisfaction with his assassin profession. Watching the 3 bullies continue to sneer at him, Zhou silently vows to prove how wrong they are for mocking him. Trailing behind Zhou like a pack of shadows, the bullies keep taunting him with laughter and jibes, but Zhou remains unfazed, his resolve shining through a confident smile. That night, Zhou lies on his bed with the system panel open, customizing his character and setting his nickname to Death Star. Recognizing that assassins are typically inconspicuous and often masked, Zhou opts to retain his original appearance, skipping the customization phase with a simple swipe. Next, the system prompts him to select a novice weapon from a range of exclusive choices displayed on the panel. Without hesitation, Zhou clicks on the 2-handed sword icon, confirming it as his weapon of choice. The system acknowledges his selection and initiates a countdown, preparing Zhou for the novice trial. Moments later, Zhou is teleported from his room to a hilly landscape, with his massive sword strapped to his back. Glancing down at his attire, Zhou admits that the design is both practical and impressive. Suddenly, the system issues a warning that the first wave of monsters is about to attack, and the atmosphere around Zhou turns ominous. Emerging from the shadows of the trees, goblins wielding crude clubs snarl and charge toward Zhou. With a confident smirk, Zhou grips his sword tightly, eager to test his newfound abilities against these enemies. As a goblin swings its club at Zhou, he swiftly activates Hand of God, causing the weapon to disappear and reappear in his own hand. The goblin looks confused, staring at its empty hands, unable to comprehend how its weapon vanished so suddenly. The system explains to Zhou that Hand of God randomly steals items, skills, or attributes, depending on chance. Frustrated by the randomness of the skill, Zhou punches the system panel, venting his irritation. Another goblin lunges at him, roaring in fury, its club raised high to strike. Reacting quickly, Zhou uses the stolen club to parry the incoming attack, deflecting it with precision. Activating Insight, Zhou identifies the goblin's weakness as its vulnerable, unprotected head. When the goblin swings its club again, Zhou dodges backward with agility, evading the attack. Seizing the opportunity, Zhou grips the club with both hands and lunges forward, targeting the goblin's exposed head. With a resounding impact, Zhou lands a powerful blow on the goblin's head. Witnessing this, the remaining goblins freeze in terror, their jaws dropping in disbelief. Tossing aside the broken club, Joe faces the other goblins, ready to finish the fight. In a flurry of motion, Joe defeats the goblins, dual-wielding their stolen clubs, gaining experience points and leveling up along the way. Examining his skill panel afterward, Joe realizes that Hand of God becomes more effective when paired with assassin-exclusive abilities. The system interrupts, announcing the arrival of the second wave of goblins, which soon appears in overwhelming numbers. Joe draws his two-handed sword, pointing it at the incoming horde, daring them to approach. With a mighty swing, Joe unleashes a shockwave, scattering multiple goblins and sending them flying. In a fluid motion, he follows up with a wide arc swing, eliminating the remaining goblins in one decisive blow. After the battle, Joe checks his stat panel, noticing a significant increase in attributes and his level rising to 2. With his strength at 36, health at 200, mana at 120, and other stats soaring, Joe readies himself for the ultimate confrontation. Suddenly, the sound of galloping footsteps jolts him, prompting Joe to grab his sword and scan his surroundings. To his shock, the final boss, a level 10 night demon with cat-like features, appears behind him, asking if he was looking for her. Startled by the boss's sudden appearance, Joe quickly leaps a few steps back, his mind racing with confusion over how she emerged out of nowhere. With an air of arrogance, the boss points a sharp claw at Joe, mocking him by declaring that the large sword he carries is insignificant to her. Irritated by her condescending tone, Joe activates his God's Hand skill, propelling himself forward at lightning speed before the boss can even react. In an instant, Joe dashes past her, positioning himself strategically behind her. The boss turns around with a sneer, her tone dripping with disdain as she claims his attack was ineffective, but her expression twists into fury as she realizes her ring is now on Joe's finger. Noticing her escalating rage, Joe feels a chill of danger, especially since the cooldown for his God's Hand skill hasn't yet refreshed. Strategizing to buy time, Joe raises his hand to flaunt the ring, remarking that it's stunning and perfectly suited to the boss, whom he calls even more dazzling. Taken aback by the unexpected compliment, the boss blushes deeply, her cheeks flushing as she shyly agrees with Joe's assessment. Joe, seizing the moment, proudly proclaims that he acquired the ring through his skill and questions why she insists he return it. The cooldown timer for his God's Hand skill ticks down to mere seconds as Joe carefully watches for the boss's next move. Enraged by his defiance, the boss enters a berserk mode, causing her attributes to surge by a formidable 30%. Joe bides his time, his focus sharp as the cooldown now dwindles to just 1 second. Suddenly, the boss charges at him with incredible speed, her claws slicing through the air and landing a heavy strike before Joe can fully react. Although wounded, Joe smirks internally, pleased that his plan to draw her closer has worked. The boss raises her claws high for another fierce attack, but this time, Joe manages to block her blow with his sword. Seeing her overwhelming strike thwarted by the very weapon she belittled, the boss falters in surprise. Taking advantage of her momentary distraction, Joe activates the God's Hand skill, his hand igniting with a vibrant glow of energy. Channeling the power of the skill, he raises his hand and directly targets the boss, successfully stealing her ultimate ability. 10 steps, 1 fatal strike. The boss stumbles in shock as the realization dawns that her ultimate move has been stripped away, leaving her powerless to use it. In the blink of an eye, Joe teleports behind her, activating his insight skill to pinpoint her weak spot just below the nape of her neck. Sensing danger, the boss whips her head around, catching sight of Joe poised for a decisive strike. Utilizing the very skill he had just stolen, Joe lifts his sword high, aiming directly at the boss with pinpoint accuracy. With a masterful blow, Joe forces the boss to collapse to the ground, defeated before his overwhelming strength. Struggling to comprehend Joe's unparalleled power, the boss demands to know his identity, to which Joe, his eyes glowing with intensity, declares himself as Death Star. As the system announces the boss's defeat, Joe reflects that she was far more formidable than the goblins he had previously faced. The system rewards Joe for completing the beginner ultimate trial by granting him the coveted forbidden treasure chest. At the same time, a global notification of Joe's triumph and his reward reverberates across the system, sparking intrigue among players worldwide. In a distant location known as the Church of the End, a demon learns of Joe's victory and bursts into sinister laughter, vowing to capture Joe and use him as a sacrifice to resurrect their lord. Meanwhile, within the Blue Star Foundation, an emergency meeting of elite professionals concludes with a unanimous decision to monitor Joe closely and ensure his safety at all costs. Feeling an itch in his nose, Joe wonders who might be thinking about him so intently. His curiosity piqued, he approaches the treasure chest, his excitement growing as he anticipates the rewards hidden within. As he lifts the chest's lid, a dazzling golden light bursts forth, leaving Joe utterly starstruck at the brilliance of its contents. In this game world, treasure chests come in varying levels of rarity, from ordinary wooden chests to precious golden ones, and even to the uniquely dazzling diamond chests. Among all these, the most coveted and extraordinary is the Forbidden Treasure Chest, the one Joe has just unlocked. As Joe opens the forbidden chest, he is awarded a legendary weapon of unparalleled might, the Damocles Sword, capable of unleashing 400% damage along with electrifying lightning attacks. Holding the legendary blade in his hands, Joe can't help but grin widely, boldly declaring that with this weapon, he is akin to a walking nuclear powerhouse. Meanwhile, outside Joe's apartment, a hooded stranger arrives and begins knocking persistently, claiming to be an old friend of Joe. Instantly alerted by the system about the presence of a visitor, Joe momentarily believes it might be his sister and quickly hides his in-game identity, Death Star, to maintain secrecy. Dismissing the game interface with a simple wave, Joe strides toward the door and asks the stranger who they are as the knocking grows more insistent. Opening the door cautiously, Joe is greeted by a hooded individual whose enigmatic aura immediately raises his suspicions. With an unsettling smile, the stranger introduces himself as a preacher and begins rambling about his church, thrusting his hand forward to reveal a crimson emblem etched into his palm. Finding the situation increasingly bizarre, Joe subtly reaches for his phone and, while maintaining a polite demeanor, thanks the stranger before discreetly dialing the authorities behind his back. Before Joe can close the door, the stranger wedges his fingers into the gap and, gripping the doorframe tightly, demands to know if Joe has called the police. Without waiting for a response, the stranger violently forces the door open, shouting with fury and accusing Joe of daring to summon the authorities. The stranger then conjures a glowing blade out of thin air and, with a menacing glare and bared teeth, ominously declares that he will send Joe to meet the Lord. Raising his weapon high above his head, the stranger prepares to bring it down in a devastating strike aimed directly at Joe. Reacting swiftly, Joe instinctively raises his hand to activate the God's Hand skill, but the system coldly informs him that the skill cannot be used against human players. Cursing his misfortune, Joe leans back just in time, narrowly dodging the stranger's blade as it slashes through the air where he once stood. Spotting a kitchen knife resting beside a fruit bowl, Joe swiftly retreats toward it, grabbing the blade as a makeshift weapon in his defense. Focusing intently, Joe activates his insight skill and pinpoints the stranger's weak spot, a vulnerable area on the right side of his abdomen near his kidney. Harnessing the power of the 10 steps 1 fatal strike skill he had acquired earlier, Joe moves with lightning speed, dashing past the stranger to position himself strategically behind him. Suddenly, a dark, sinister aura begins to emanate from the stranger as he enters a berserk state, startling Joe and amplifying the tension in the air. With his energy-imbued blade glowing ominously, the stranger charges toward Joe with terrifying speed, while Joe stands firm, knife in hand. Just as the stranger's blade appears ready to strike Joe, an unexpected object collides with the stranger's head, knocking him off balance. With a heavy thud, the stranger collapses as two law enforcers burst into Joe's apartment, standing authoritatively in the doorway. One of the enforcers, an archer, steps forward and calmly asks Joe if he is unharmed, his tone reassuring. Meanwhile, the other enforcer, a woman, moves swiftly to apprehend the incapacitated stranger, securing the situation with practiced precision. Overwhelmed by the rapid series of events, Joe struggles to catch his breath, his mind racing to process how close he had been to peril mere moments ago. 30 minutes later, as the enforcers prepare to leave, Joe accompanies them to the car, where the archer explains that the stranger was part of a dangerous cult targeting players. As the enforcers drive away, Joe's sister, Xingyu, arrives and immediately expresses concern, asking why the enforcers were at his apartment. Noticing Joe's somber expression, Xingyu gently reassures him and inquires if he is truly alright, her voice filled with sisterly care. Turning away, Joe dismisses her worries, claiming the enforcers were conducting a routine inquiry. Unlocking the door with a simple tap of his passcode, Joe invites Xingyu inside, where she curiously asks about his profession and in-game nickname, eager to connect with him in the game. Hesitating for a moment, Joe keeps his Death Star identity a secret, and his pause causes Xingyu to assume he has awakened a lackluster profession, prompting her to offer comforting words. Feigning a yawn, Joe declares he is feeling tired and excuses himself, stating he is heading to bed. Ascending the stairs, Joe silently hopes this maneuver will spare him from more probing inquiries from his sister. Left standing alone, Xingyu watches Joe disappear upstairs, her expression tinged with subtle hurt as she senses his reluctance to share. 18 years ago, Joe had been abandoned as an infant, left outside a bustling restaurant, where he was found and adopted by Xingyu's family. As a young girl, Xingyu had been overjoyed when her parents introduced Joe Zhou to her, immediately embracing him as her beloved little brother. Tragically, their happiness was short-lived, as their parents passed away unexpectedly, leaving Xingyu and Zhou to navigate the world as orphans. Reflecting on the attack earlier and fearing for his sister's safety, Zhou resolves to keep his identity hidden to prevent drawing danger toward her. Clenching his fists tightly, he makes a solemn vow to himself that he will grow strong enough to shield Xingyu from any harm that may come their way. The following day, Zhou makes his way to Minghua village, determined to accept quests and level up quickly as he is currently only at level 3. Along with the plan to take quests, Zhou intends to meet the elusive thief mentor known to reside here and learn valuable skills from him before starting his journey. Entering a bustling tavern, Zhou overhears a boastful blonde drunkard loudly claiming to his friends that he is close buddies with the legendary Death Star, causing Zhou to smirk inwardly at the ridiculous bluff. Proceeding into the VIP lounge, Zhou spots the thief mentor, slouched with a drink in hand and flanked by 2 ladies, and promptly requests him to impart some of his skills. However, the mentor, clearly uninterested, casually displays 3 distinct skill options, telling Zhou to figure out which one suits him best and learn it on his own. Zhou takes a moment to weigh his options carefully, but the mentor grows impatient and shouts at him to decide quickly. Finally, Zhou declares his choice to learn the stealth skill and inquires if the mentor has any quests for him, only to be rebuked as a weakling and ordered to leave. As Zhou heads toward the exit, the blonde drunkard from earlier suggests he visit Wild Wolf Valley to level up before attempting tougher challenges. Meanwhile, back at the lounge, the 2 women hand the mentor another mug of beer and shower him with exaggerated compliments, causing his face to turn crimson with embarrassment. Suddenly, the loud thud of a wolf's lifeless body slamming onto their table startles everyone, with the women shrieking in sheer panic. Standing at level 5 now, Zhou apologizes, claiming the wolf's body slipped from his grip, while the mentor stares at him in shock, astonished by his rapid progress. The mentor, now impressed, advises Zhou to head north of the village to take on some quests, which Zhou enthusiastically agrees to. Later, Zhou arrives at the ominous Dark Ridge, searching for the dungeon as per the mentor's cryptic instructions. His mind drifts back to the mentor's words as he wonders if the easy quest might be more dangerous than it seemed. Climbing a stone staircase, Zhou cautiously pushes open the dungeon's heavy door, only to lose his footing and plummet downward. It feels like an endless void, vast and pitch black, as Zhou hurtles headfirst into the abyss. Meanwhile, back at the tavern, the thief mentor smugly reveals that he deliberately misled Zhou into accepting one of the most difficult quests as petty revenge for showing him up. With a loud crash, Zhou lands hard on the ground of what looks like a desolate, post-apocalyptic world. Rising to a sitting position, Zhou winces slightly from the impact as the system informs him he has officially entered the dungeon. Suddenly, a group of Wrath Knights, all at level 8, materializes before him, and the system assigns Zhou a daunting quest to defeat 100 of these knights within 8 hours. Reacting swiftly, Zhou summons the legendary Damocles sword, holding it high as its electrifying energy crackles ominously around him. With a surge of strength, he hurls the sword forward with immense force, sending it spinning like a whirlwind toward his enemies. The sword strikes its target with explosive power, causing a massive shockwave that obliterates 10 knights instantly, leaving Zhou satisfied with the weapon's devastating potential. Like Thor's hammer, the sword soars back to Zhou's outstretched hand, and he catches it effortlessly. Grinning slightly, Zhou continues his strategy, launching the sword repeatedly at the knights and triggering destructive blasts each time. After each explosive attack, the sword faithfully returns to Zhou's hand, enabling him to maintain the relentless assault. Once all the knights have been vanquished, Zhou safely stores the sword in his inventory and begins inspecting the valuable loot left behind by the defeated foes. Suddenly, an ominous presence begins to form behind him, and a moment later, the dungeon's colossal final boss appears. With a booming voice, the towering figure demands to know if Zhou defeated his warriors, brandishing an enormous blade while vowing to make Zhou answer for his actions. Unfazed, Zhou smirks and shifts into a combat stance, boldly challenging the boss to try and defeat him if he can. Deciding it's the perfect opportunity, Zhou activates the stealth skill he recently acquired to test its effectiveness. In the blink of an eye, he vanishes into thin air, leaving the boss bewildered and momentarily frozen in confusion. Alarmed by Zhou's sudden disappearance, the boss is left in utter disbelief, unsure of where Zhou vanished. Meanwhile, Zhou reappears silently behind the boss and, using the God's Hand skill, skillfully snatches an item from him. With swift reflexes, Zhou retreats, clutching a mysterious mask-like artifact that he just obtained. The system provides details, explaining that the mask is a unique disguise tool capable of altering the user's appearance and identity in the eyes of others. The boss, now realizing his prized mask is gone, erupts in fury, dropping to one knee and slamming his sword into the ground as as curses spill from his mouth. Dark smoke and ominous energy begin radiating from the boss, swirling around him like an erupting volcanic storm. Suddenly the boss's helmet shoots off like a cannonball, while the dark smoke thickens, veiling his upper body in an eerie shroud. Recognizing the imminent danger, Joe retreats even further. As the smoke clears, the boss's true form is revealed, with its head replaced by a massive, unblinking eye and 6 writhing tentacles extending from its neck. With a terrifying roar, the boss swings its colossal blade in a wide arc, unleashing a devastating wave of dark energy. As the deadly energy rushes toward him, Joe leaps skyward, soaring high above the shattered ground where he once stood. Landing gracefully, Joe feels a surge of relief, grateful for narrowly evading the destructive attack. However, as he steadies himself, he notices the boss charging at him with relentless speed, ready to strike. Reacting swiftly, Joe raises his sword just in time to block the boss's incoming attack, bracing against the immense force. The sheer power of the impact pushes Joe backward, forcing him to skid across the ground as he struggles to maintain his balance. Down on one knee, Joe gazes up at the monstrous figure towering before him, realizing that close combat isn't a viable strategy against such overwhelming strength. The boss's tentacles lash out, their sharp, blade-like edges slicing through the air as they assault Joe from all directions. Joe deflects the onslaught as best as he can, though one tentacle manages to strike, dealing minor damage to him. Recognizing that the battle cannot be prolonged, Joe devises a plan to end it by using the God's Hand skill to turn the tides. To lure the boss closer, Joe hurls a series of taunts, mocking the creature and stoking its rage. Enraged, the boss charges forward, lifting its enormous sword high above its head, ready to deliver a crushing blow. At that precise moment, the cooldown for God's Hand ends, and Joe activates the skill without hesitation. The skill successfully disarms the boss, causing its sword to vanish and reappear in Joe's grasp. Now armed with dual blades, Joe stands tall, exuding confidence and a powerful aura. Activating the insight skill, Joe pinpoints the boss's weakness and follows up with the 10 steps 1 fatal strike technique, dashing past the boss in a flash of speed. For a brief moment, it seems as though Joe's attack had no effect, with the boss appearing untouched. But soon after, the system calculates an immense damage total of 19,478. Joe remarks with a smirk that the combination of his overpowered weapon, insight skill, and 10 steps 1 fatal strike makes battles like this effortless. Furious, the boss enters a berserk state, sprouting additional tentacles and a cluster of glowing, menacing eyes that make it even more monstrous. Unfazed, Joe points at the boss and ridicules its grotesque form, claiming it's so hideous it makes him want to vomit. The Damocles sword, partially embedded in the ground, begins crackling with volatile energy, responding to Joe's silent command. With a flick of his finger, Joe sends the sword spinning at high velocity, hurling it directly at the boss. The sword strikes its target with immense force, triggering a cataclysmic explosion as lightning descends from the heavens to amplify the destruction. The system promptly notifies Joe of his victory and offers the option to broadcast his achievement anonymously to other players, which Joe eagerly accepts. As part of his reward, the system grants Joe a golden treasure chest, which he immediately opens with great anticipation. Inside the chest, Joe finds a hidden quest, tasking him with delivering an important letter to someone named Xiaoyu in Dreamless Village. Inside the bustling tavern, adventurers are discussing the thrill of triggering hidden quests, marveling at their rarity and the unmatched opportunities they offer for growth and glory. With a smug grin, the thief mentor assumes Joe must have abandoned his pursuit since 2 hours have passed. However, the tavern door suddenly bursts open with a resounding crash as Joe strides in, his confident entrance startling the mentor and everyone inside. Stunned by Joe's victorious return, the mentor's jaw drops as he struggles to process what he is witnessing. Joe tosses a hefty sack containing 500 gleaming gold coins onto the table, demanding answers from the mentor, who hastily agrees to comply with any question. Producing the mysterious parchment detailing his hidden quest, Joe inquires whether the mentor knows the location of Dreamless Village. Examining the parchment closely, the mentor takes a hearty swig from his bottle before slamming it onto the table, revealing that Dreamless Village is now infamously known as the Village of the Deceased. Startled by the revelation, Joe presses the mentor for more details, eager to uncover the truth behind it. The mentor explains that just 30 miles west of the beginner village lies a treacherous tunnel leading to the Dreamless Village dungeon, a perilous area that manifests nightly with monsters starting at level 25 and a formidable level 30 boss. Adding intrigue, the mentor describes the dungeon as a chance dungeon, where players making the correct choices can unlock rare profession-changing props. With a confident wave of his hand, Joe boldly declares his intention to face the dungeon, undeterred by its dangers. Turning on his heel, Joe smirks and strides exits out of the tavern, leaving the mentor staring after him in silent horror, clearly thinking Zhou's decision borders on madness. Later that day, Zhou arrives at the imposing Black Dragon Emperor building, a towering and majestic structure that dominates the skyline beneath a crystal-clear blue sky. This grand establishment, one of the 3 prominent chambers of commerce in the nation, serves as a hub where players can acquire virtually anything they desire. To Zhou's surprise, he spots his sister, Xingyu, walking alongside a friend, though her presence doesn't seem to please him. Noticing Zhou, Xingyu expresses surprise and questions what brings him to this place, her curiosity piqued. Gesturing to his attire, Xingyu inquires whether Zhou has awakened the assassin profession, to which he proudly confirms. Xingyu's friend begins teasing Zhou, prompting him to cross his arms in irritation and demand she stop fooling around. Xingyu intervenes, scolding the pair for their constant bickering every time they meet, her tone a mix of annoyance and exasperation. Softening her demeanor, Xingyu offers to buy Zhou some gear to help him navigate his beginner phase with greater ease. With a mischievous glint, Xingyu's friend warns Zhou not to ruin the gear, suggesting he'll be held accountable, causing Zhou to nervously ask Xingyu to choose something inexpensive. Xingyu then instructs the sellers to bring out the finest beginner assassin gear available. A helpful attendant gestures for Zhou to step into the changing room and select gear that suits him best. Moments later, Zhou emerges, wearing a majestic star-themed set that unfortunately makes him look comical, eliciting uncontrollable laughter from Xingyu's friend. Next, Zhou tries the large flower set next, which again results in a clownish appearance, drawing more sneers and barely contained laughter from Xingyu's friend. Switching to the blue enchantress set, Zhou now resembles a rock star, but Xingyu's friend struggles to hold back her laughter, covering her mouth to stifle her amusement. After tirelessly trying on countless outfits, Zhou finally settles on a suitable ensemble consisting of a dragon trench coat, a dark t-shirt, black night pants, and hermit boots. Exhausted from the effort of trying nearly 100 different outfits, Zhou growls in frustration while the 2 girls compliment his chosen look. The attendant tallies the cost, which totals an eye-watering 189,999 gold coins, prompting Xingyu to nonchalantly pull out her purse and cover the expense. Glancing at his watch, Zhou realizes he's behind schedule and bids farewell to Xingyu and her friend before hurrying off. That evening, Zhou arrives outside the ominous tunnel that serves as the gateway to Dreamless Village. Entering the tunnel, Zhou ventures deeper into the darkness and soon emerges in the eerie Dreamless Village, where he notices 3 moving figures at the foot of the stairs. As he descends the steps, he senses a peculiar barrier enveloping the village, a mystical force that likely blankets the entire area. Despite hearing warnings of level 25 monsters, Zhou's attention is drawn to the sight of 3 small children playing innocently on the street, leaving him puzzled. When one of the children trips and falls, Zhou approaches to help, leaning down and asking if the child is unharmed. But to his astonishment, the child, who appears undead, politely thanks him and assures him that he is perfectly fine. In a sudden twist of fate, the tranquil village is ambushed by armored knights who ignite houses, creating chaos before Zhou's very eyes. Witnessing this horrifying scene, Zhou feels a surge of anger, which intensifies as he recalls the tragic loss of his parents alongside his sister. At that moment, the system notifies Zhou of a quest, urging him to defeat the knights and avenge the villagers who had been erased from their home. Drawing his sword with a determined grip, Zhou points it at the knights and challenges them, shouting for them to face him if they dare. Without warning, the knights transform into undead warriors, their rotting forms revealing their true identities as they charge at Zhou with weapons raised, growling ferociously. Finding their uproar irritating, Zhou activates his stealth skill, disappearing from sight in an instant, leaving the undead knights bewildered and frozen in confusion. One of the undead swings his blade wildly at the spot where Zhou had stood, but his attack slices through empty air. Zhou, on the other hand, seizes the moment and delivers a precise strike with his sword, effortlessly taking down the first knight. Seeing Zhou reappear, the remaining undead knights howl in rage and collectively lunge at him, their fury burning brighter. Moving like a flash of lightning, Zhou zips across the battlefield, delivering rapid strikes to each knight, defeating them one after another with unrelenting precision. After an intense battle, Zhou finishes off the knights, earning a surge of experience points that propel him to level 20, with the excess experience sealed for later release upon completing the hidden quest. As the system rewards him, a second quest appears, instructing Zhou to defeat the undead lord, and the ground beneath him begins to tremble violently. A colossal hand bursts out from the earth, followed by the upper half of the level 30 undead lord, whose towering form boasts an intimidating 100,000 HP. With a thunderous roar, the undead lord proclaims himself as the immortal ruler, wielding supreme supreme authority over all. But before the undead lord can fully emerge, Zhou launches a swift attack, striking with all his might and interrupting the lord's ascent. Speaking in a calm but serious tone, Zhou commands the undead lord to return to the depths from which he came and cease his reign of destruction. Leaping back, Zhou watches as the undead lord erupts into a flash of light, defeated instantly, leaving no trace of his supposed immortality. The system rewards Zhou with 2 items: an undead bracelet that enhances the wearer's physique and agility while granting the ability to summon a skeleton. Alongside the bracelet, Zhou gains a new skill called Ghost Steps, which dramatically increases his movement speed and evasion rate, and he immediately chooses to learn it. He also receives the Broken Lord's Helmet, a quest accessory that serves as proof of the undead lord's defeat, marking his victory. Staring at the helmet hovering in his palms, Zhou wonders if it might hold the key to the next stage of his quest. With his tasks complete, he ventures further and soon arrives at the eerie cemetery of the Dreamless Village. The system announces that Zhou has reached the land of no dreams, and he notices a small child kneeling nearby, crying uncontrollably. Kneeling beside the sobbing girl, Zhou gently reassures her, asking if she is Xiaoyu and if she's alright. The girl looks up at Zhou, her tear-streaked face confirming that she is indeed Xiaoyu, as her quiet voice answers him. Relieved, Zhou smiles warmly and tells Xiaoyu he has come to save her, but her gaze shifts to the sword on his back, and fear clouds her expression. Suddenly, Xiaoyu pushes Zhou back, accusing him of being a bad person sent to hurt her like the others before. A system notification informs Zhou that he has angered Xiaoyu, and while he desperately tries to explain himself, she dashes past him and runs away. Stopping a few feet away, Xiaoyu's demeanor transforms entirely, her innocent form now surrounded by a dark, menacing aura as she accuses him of lying like all bad people. Chanting an incantation, Xiaoyu summons a horde of shadowy mobs, their glowing eyes glaring at Zhou with malice. Pointing a finger at Zhou, Xiaoyu commands the mobs to eliminate the so-called bad guy who dares to stand before her. As the mobs advance on Zhou, their weapons gleaming ominously, Zhou grips his sword, ready to defend himself against the oncoming threat. But then, he recalls the thief mentor's advice, reminding him to seek an alternative path rather than rely solely on brute force. So even as the mobs surround him and their hands close in, accusing him of tormenting them, Zhou chooses not to retaliate, standing perfectly still amidst their fury. After a moment, everything falls eerily silent, and Zhou slowly opens his eyes, finding himself completely alone, with the once threatening mobs now vanished without a trace. As he gazes upward, he sees a figure descending from above, a woman with long, flowing hair, who commands the unyielding souls to return to the place they once came from. She floats gracefully down and lands softly a few feet away from Zhou, who watches her in awe, silently wondering who she could be. In the meantime, Xiaoyu runs toward the woman, calling out to her as Qingyu, as if they've been apart for far too long. Sobbing uncontrollably, Xiaoyu throws herself into Qingyu's arms, and Qingyu gently pats her head, offering comfort. Watching the two embrace like old friends, Zhou is left speechless, observing them with silent curiosity. However, despite the shock, he feels a sense of relief knowing that Xiaoyu is happy to see someone. Just then, an odd sensation stirs within him, causing him to clear his throat, his cheeks turning a deep shade of red. As Zhou watches them carefully, he notices a striking resemblance between the two women. Not only do they share the same surname, but they also bear a resemblance to one another. Suddenly, Xiaoyu points at Zhou and declares to Qingyu that he is a bad person, urging her to rid of him. But Qingyu, still gently patting Xiaoyu's head, reassures her that Zhou is not the bad guy she believes him to be. Just then, Zhou receives a system notification that unlocks a side quest to learn about Xiaoyu's past life, and he asks Qingyu what happened in the village. Qingyu nods and begins to recount the tragic tale, explaining that, a decade ago, Dreamless Village was once known as Carefree Village, where its people lived in happiness and harmony. Although Xiaoyu's family wasn't wealthy, they were full of joy, but that peace was shattered when one day they found a group of knights lying unconscious and chose to help them, only to later learn they were demons in disguise. Zhou picks up a knight's helmet from the ground and, glancing at Qingyu, asks if she's referring to the same monsters he had just fought and defeated. Qingyu confirms and explains that those knights, whom Xiaoyu's parents had saved, turned on the villagers, wiping out the entire population. Suddenly, Xiaoyu begins to sob uncontrollably as she cries out that it's all her fault because she begged her parents to save those knights. Qingyu adds that after the incident, the village was renamed Dreamless Village, its fallen souls trapped by Xiaoyu's regret and overwhelming obsession. The system warns that Xiaoyu is sinking deeper into sorrow, and in the next instant, she begins to enter a berserk state, unable to contain her emotions any longer. Dark energy starts to swirl around Xiaoyu, enveloping her like a violent tornado, and Qingyu urgently warns Zhou to leave the village village quickly. The system presents Zhou with a choice: stay and attempt to save Xiaoyu, but with a daunting 1% chance of success, or leave and abandon her to her fate. With every passing moment, Xiaoyu loses more control, and the storm of sorrow around her grows ever stronger, threatening to consume everything in its path. Struggling to stand against the overwhelming pressure, Qingyu tries to reach out to Xiaoyu but finds herself barely able to make any progress. At that moment, Zhou steps forward, grabbing Qingyu's hand and pulling her back, asking her to come with him. However, Qingyu insists she cannot leave Xiaoyu behind and is determined to save her. Zhou urges Qingyu to leave now, promising that he will stay behind and do everything he can to help Xiaoyu, no matter the cost. With resolve in his eyes, Zhou turns away and takes a step forward, struggling against the overwhelming storm of sorrow. Seeing Zhou risking his life for someone he barely knows, Qingyu is taken aback, her heart filled with surprise at his courage. Despite the immense pressure pushing against him, Zhou presses forward slowly, his hand extending toward Xiaoyu. As he draws closer, Zhou calls out to Xiaoyu, his voice firm, telling her that he has a letter meant for her, one he wishes her to read. With outstretched arms, he presents the letter to Xiaoyu and explains that he obtained it from a dark knight after defeating him in battle. Xiaoyu takes the letter and begins to read through it, soon realizing that everything had been a cunning plot. The knight's injuries had all been part of a larger plan. Zhou reassures Xiaoyu that, even if she hadn't saved those knights, others would have entered the village anyway, and the outcome would have been the same. Zhou's words bring comfort to Xiaoyu as he assures her that she is not to blame for what happened, and slowly, her anger begins to subside. A moment later, Xiaoyu's form begins to dissipate, transforming into a spirit as she ascends to the afterlife, finally finding peace and release from her torment. With tears welling in her eyes, Qingyu gazes skyward as Xiaoyu rises toward the heavens, silently thankful to Zhou for doing the impossible and bringing Xiaoyu salvation. As the first light of morning breaks, casting warmth over the once troubled village, Zhou and Qingyu stand side by side, looking toward the horizon, their hearts content knowing that the nightmare has finally come to an end. Before parting ways, Qingyu, in gratitude, offers Zhou a gift: the Reaper's Medal, an item that, when used, can unlock a special profession for players. Surprised by such a priceless gift, Zhou hesitates for a moment, unsure of whether to accept, but Qingyu insists, and with no other choice, he reaches out to take it. As Zhou accepts the gift, Qingyu notices the ring from the cat-like boss on his finger and is momentarily startled, wondering if he could be the legendary Death Star player. With a final glance, Qingyu turns and begins to walk away, bidding Zhou a soft farewell. Holding the Reaper's Medal in his hand, Zhou comments to himself that it is a token of love from Qingyu, and as he watches her walk away, he smiles, promising to see her again someday, causing Qingyu to blush slightly in response. In the Grand Hall of White Emperor Center, a meeting is underway, with two vigilant guards standing watch outside. Inside the hall, officials sit along a table as a man urgently reports that of the 12 rare professions awakened in Emperor City, 3 have been defeated, accusing a player named Death Star. Lord Baisheng, the ruler of White Emperor City, counters this claim, stating that Death Star is too powerful to waste time on mere mediocrity. Zhao Jun, the head of the Zhao family, insists, asking Lord Bai what if Death Star is, in fact, a vengeful, narrow-minded villain. Su Heng, the deputy city lord, intervenes, assuring them that he has sent individuals to investigate and suggesting that they wait for the report to arrive. While the officials continue to argue, a guard steps into the hall, carrying urgent news for Lord Bai. Approaching Lord Bai, the guard hands him a file, explaining that 3 hours ago, they searched a bar, discovered traces of the Scorpion assassin, a D-class assassin linked to the Church of the End, and found this file. As Lord Bai opens the file, his eyes widen in shock as he finds numerous documents inside, each containing assassination orders, with every rare profession awakened in the entire city listed. Furious, he slams his fist on the table, demanding that the guards immediately inform the awakened individuals to stay on high alert for potential assassins. Su Heng points to one document in particular and remarks that it's the list for Death Star, but they have no clue who he truly is or where he is hiding. Meanwhile, in his apartment, Zhou is gazing at the medal Qingyu gave him, a token of her love, cherishing it deeply as a reminder of her memory. Just then, Qingyu approaches from behind and teasingly asks what is so special about that medal, which Zhou has been staring at for the entire morning. Playfully, she asks if the medal is a love token from some girl, making Zhou's face flush a bright red. Pressing herself closer to Zhou, Qingyu taunts him, asking if he's nervous because she guessed the truth, her voice tinged with mockery. With a proud smirk, she declares that she's happy for Zhou, proud that he has finally found a girl for himself. With that, she leaves the room, telling Zhou to use the medal to complete his his profession transfer and come down for breakfast afterward. Closing the door behind her, Xingyu wonders how long it's been since Zhou received his awakening, as he is already able to change professions so quickly. Shrugging off the thought, she notes that while Zhou may grow stronger, he will still need her protection as his older sister. Meanwhile, in his room, Zhou activates the Reaper's medal, and the system asks if he's ready for the profession change, to which Zhou eagerly affirms. A moment later, the system congratulates him on successfully changing his profession to Grim Reaper. Zhou is delighted to see his attributes skyrocket after the profession transfer, feeling a powerful aura surge within him, his body becoming lighter and his 5 senses sharper than ever. Clenching his fist, he realizes he could probably break a steel plate with a single punch and tests his newfound strength by thrusting his fist forward. Outside, onlookers are startled by a small explosion coming from one of the apartments, sending concrete and debris tumbling down from the building. From a small hole in the wall, Xingyu scolds Zhou, telling him to clean up the mess or risk missing out on breakfast. As she turns to leave, Zhou calls out, asking where she's going, and she casually replies that she's headed to work. Checking his stats, Zhou notices that his intelligence is still the lowest of his attributes, and he wonders if that's the reason behind his earlier poor decisions. However, his inner demon suggests that his lack of intelligence is due to his older sister suppressing his younger brother's bloodline talent, prompting Zhou to angrily punch the demon away. Returning his focus to his attributes, Zhou notices a new talent bar, now equipped with 2 extra skills that he can unlock at levels 25 and 35. The first of these skills is a special Reaper's talent, which adds an additional 10% of the target's HP as real damage when dealing blows. With a triumphant laugh, Zhou confidently declares that when he reaches level 35, he will unlock the 2 Reaper skills and become a true Grim Reaper. Equipping his sword, he dashes out of his room, determined to fight monsters and level up as quickly as possible. But before he can leave, his inner demon reminds him that his sister specifically told him to clean up the mess first. So, Zhou spends the next hour or so tidying up and finally walks outside to dispose of 2 large garbage bags in the bins. Just as he finishes dumping the bags, someone calls out to him from behind. It's Yaya, the HR representative of the Scorpion Guild, and as she descends the stairs, she points out that she heard Zhou awaken the assassin profession, offering him an invitation to join her guild. Stepping closer to Zhou, she pulls out a contract, explaining that by joining the guild, Zhou will receive assistance in leveling up quickly, though the cost would be handing over 10% of his annual income to the guild. She even attempts to charm Zhou, flaunting her physique and asking if he's interested in her offer. However, Zhou isn't easily swayed by charm and waves his hand dismissively, stating that he isn't interested. Surprised by Zhou's lack of reaction, Yaya is momentarily stunned, as this is the first time someone has rejected her advances. She shouts after him, asking if he's truly serious about not joining the guild as Zhou calmly walks away. Determined, Yaya activates a skill to ambush Zhou, warning him that if he turns down her offer, there will be consequences. However, she quickly realizes that she cannot attack Zhou in such a public place and decides to take him to a more secluded area. With a slight glance at Yaya, Zhou casually remarks that if she had approached him elsewhere, he might have been tempted. Zhou knows that when a woman tries to ambush you while you're doing something mundane like taking out the trash, there's a high chance she's up to no good. He explains that he has already promised to join a guild where his sister is the vice president, and thus, he cannot betray her by joining another guild. Hearing this, Yaya licks her lips, intrigued by Zhou's loyalty, and decides to deal with him later, starting with confronting his sister first. Storm clouds gather over the emerald forest, lightning flashes across the sky, casting an eerie purple glow that illuminates the intense battle below. A powerful strike slices through a pack of wolves, taking down half a dozen with a single, swift attack. Nearby, a player faces off against a colossal stone evil turtle, his sword raised high, aiming for the beast's vulnerable spot. Out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning descends upon the turtle, dealing massive damage. Realizing someone else has stolen his kill, the player whirls around in fury, demanding to know who dares to interfere with his hunt. It's not just him, but several other players, whose prey has been taken by the mysterious Zhou, stand stunned, watching as one lone player decimates so many monsters with ease. As Zhou's sword returns to him, crackling with energy and hovering above the heads of the onlookers, they are filled with dread, lowering their gazes in fear. Like a true warrior, Zhou effortlessly catches the sword as it flies back into his grasp, without a hint of strain. With a glance at his stat window, Zhou realizes he has been hunting for nearly 3 hours hours, only gaining a single level in the process. At this pace, he calculates it will take at least 2 days to reach level 25, the threshold to unlock his new skill, which feels far too slow. The other players overhear Zhou's remark about reaching level 25 in just 3 days and burst into laughter, mocking his ambition. Frustrated by Zhou's actions, some of the players begin to surround him, clearly upset not only by the stolen kills, but also by his lofty words. Zhou, arms crossed, casually points out that this is a public area, and any player is free to hunt down any monster they wish. The remark only serves to infuriate the others further, with one of the players angrily declaring that this territory belongs to their Morrowind guild. With weapons drawn, the players step forward, intent on teaching Zhou a lesson, ready to show him the consequences of his actions. Out of nowhere, an arrow flies toward Zhou, aimed directly at his head, but Zhou reacts with lightning speed, grabbing the arrow mid-flight and snapping it effortlessly in half before it can reach him. The other players rush at Zhou from behind, their swords and axes raised high, but Zhou is already drawing his own weapon. Before they can strike, he swings his sword in a wide arc, shattering their weapons and dealing significant damage in the process. Meanwhile, an assassin quietly sneaks up behind Zhou, wielding a kitchen knife, hoping to catch him off guard while he's distracted by the others. The assassin lunges at Zhou, cursing him with every breath, aiming for a deadly strike. Aware of the assassin's approach, Zhou drives the tip of his sword into the ground, summoning an energy field that shocks the attacker on contact. The assassin is struck with a jolt of electricity, taking severe damage. Kneeling before him, the other players beg Zhou for mercy, pleading for their lives and apologizing for their previous actions. Zhou sheaths his sword, placing it casually behind his back, as the players, now on all fours, bow deeply before him, vowing to leave the area immediately. Zhou nods, agreeing to let them go, but only after asking if they know of any places where he can gain maximum EXP and level up quickly. One of the players, hesitant but willing to cooperate, mentions a rumor about a secret realm hidden within the Emerald Forest. With this new lead, Zhou turns to leave, instructing the players to leave as well and to never cross his path again. Grateful for their lives, the players bow even lower, offering thanks as Zhou walks away, his back turned to them. But as soon as Zhou is out of earshot, the player who had begged for mercy sneers, promising to call their boss and seek revenge against Zhou. After a short walk, Zhou arrives at the heart of the Emerald Forest, an area known as the Miasma Swamp, where danger lurks in every shadow. Carefully, he grips his sword, wary of the potential ambush from monsters that might be lurking in this ominous place. Just then, a system notification pops up, informing Zhou that he has triggered a random quest called the Werewolf Secret Realm. The Werewolf Secret Realm is a hidden domain filled with werewolves ranging from levels 30 to 40, and Zhou's eyes gleam with excitement as he realizes the opportunity to farm them for substantial EXP. Without hesitation, he charges forward toward the realm entrance, his sword held tightly in his hand, ready for whatever awaits inside. Just 15 minutes later, Zhou emerges from the realm, having vanquished all the monsters with ease. The system congratulates him for clearing the secret realm, offering a reward pack that appears in his inventory. When the system asks if Zhou would like to view the rewards, he eagerly accepts, his eyes widening in awe at the items before him. A content smile spreads across Zhou's face as he marvels at the high-quality rewards, all of which are level 40 items. After stowing the items in his inventory, he sits on a large stone, realizing that his inventory is nearly full. Deciding to take a moment, Zhou begins to examine his rewards more closely, planning to clear out some unnecessary items to make room. First, he inspects the weapons, noting their average attributes, and decides to melt them down for materials instead of keeping them. The next item, a wolfskin shirt, proves to be equally unimpressive, so Zhou opts to sell it immediately. With the final remnants of his haul, Zhou reaches level 31, thanks to the EXP gained from the werewolves. This new level unlocks the Death Crow skill, allowing Zhou to transform into a crow and soar through the skies, gaining enhanced abilities in the process. Suddenly, Zhou is startled by a group of players who approach him from behind, calling out to him. The same player from before returns, now accompanied by his boss and several others, all intent on taking revenge on Zhou. The boss, a level 40 president of the Morrowind Guild, tells Zhou that he can still surrender and hand over all his loot if he wishes to avoid trouble. However, Zhou, without the slightest hint of worry, confidently states that he had anticipated this outcome when he let the bald player go. Hearing this, the boss glances at the bald player, his eyes narrowing in curiosity. Without warning, he places his hand on top of the bald player's head, head, and the player recoils. Gripping the bald player's head tightly, the boss begins draining energy from him, casually questioning why the player shares the same hairstyle as him. Releasing the bald player after transforming him into a ghastly, skeletal form, the boss accuses him of attempting to imitate him by adopting the same haircut. Turning his attention back to Zhou, the boss demands that he hand over the secret realm teleportation bead if he hopes to leave here alive. Witnessing the boss effortlessly overpower the bald player, Zhou momentarily hesitates, feeling slightly taken aback. The other players surround Zhou completely, forming a tight circle around him, their weapons raised and ready. Zhou scans the group carefully, contemplating whether he should test his new magical ability on them. Without warning, he releases a burst of power, activating his transformation skill and shifting into a crow, soaring into the sky with blinding speed. As the dust settles, the players look around in confusion, and the boss urgently commands them to spread out in search of Zhou. Soaring above the forest as a crow, Zhou decides to test his insight skill, curious to see if it works in his transformed state. To his relief, the skill functions perfectly, allowing him to see the weaknesses of the players below, including the boss's hidden vulnerability, his hand, explaining why he always wears gloves. Realizing the potential of his newfound knowledge, Zhou activates the God's Hand skill, aiming it at the boss. The skill strikes the boss, stealing his prison contract skill and bestowing it upon Zhou. Unaware that he has just lost a valuable ability, the boss senses something unusual and instinctively uses his aura sense skill. His eyes scan the sky, and the moment he locks onto Zhou in his crow form, he issues a command to his crew to bring Zhou down. Before the players can act, Zhou releases his feathers, launching a total of 72 sharp projectiles down upon them. The feathers descend like a storm, striking most of the players, defeating them instantly as the boss raises a hand to summon a shield. Using his summoning skill, the boss conjures a dummy figure above him to block the incoming barrage of feathers, protecting himself. Realizing the boss's tactic, Zhou, now back in his human form, charges at him, his sword crackling with energy as he raises it high for a decisive strike. In a single, powerful swing, he destroys the dummy shield into two. As Zhou lands on the ground, the boss steps forward, hands raised to attack, declaring that he will defeat Zhou and claim his sword. Utilizing the prison contract skill, the boss releases tendrils of dark energy, embedding them into the defeated players, transforming them into his personal minions. Watching this, Zhou notes how overpowered the skill is and feels pleased that he had stolen it earlier. With the dark energy threads still connected to the zombified players, the boss commands them to surround Zhou and close in on him. With a wicked grin, the boss taunts Zhou, declaring that he will control him as well, just like the others, and sees his sword. With his eyes glowing a fierce red, Zhou points his sword at the boss and warns him not to even think about touching his sword. Without hesitation, Zhou takes out the secret realm teleportation bead, activating it to open a portal behind him. Seeing Zhou disappear into the portal, the boss orders his minions to follow, charging after him with his zombified players, determined to catch him. Entering the secret realm, the boss finds Zhou standing before a large group of imposing werewolves, clearly ready for battle. The boss mocks Zhou, calling it laughable that he would rather face the werewolves than submit to him and hand over his sword. Stepping forward, the werewolf commander growls fiercely, declaring that the humans who dared to enter their domain would pay a heavy price. Observing the werewolf king's formidable attributes, Zhou is impressed and quickly uses the prison contract skill he stole from the boss to take control of. The contract with the Wolf King succeeds, and both the king and his minions come under Zhou's complete command. Bowing deeply before Zhou, the Wolf King reverently addresses him as master and eagerly awaits his orders. Pointing toward the boss and his team, Zhou commands the Wolf King to teach them a harsh lesson. Witnessing Zhou's powerful skill to dominate the wolves, the boss is utterly dumbfounded and unable to comprehend what just happened. Transforming back into a crow, Zhou ascends rapidly into the air, while the wolves charge forward with relentless aggression. Zhou unleashes a barrage of feathers from above, targeting the players below as the wolves attack them. In his frantic attempt to escape, the boss trips over a tree root, losing his balance and tumbling unceremoniously to the ground. Lying on the ground, the boss looks up in terror as the wolves close in on him, begging desperately for mercy and offering Zhou all of his treasured items. Descending, Zhou transforms back into his human form, landing atop the massive shoulders of the imposing Wolf King while summoning his energy-infused sword. The boss's eyes widen in sheer terror as cracks crackling bolts of dark energy descend, striking him with devastating power as the wolves overwhelm the boss. Zhou sheathes his sword, remarking coldly that the boss deserves the punishment he brought upon himself. With the encounter settled, he strides confidently toward the portal, stepping through and emerging seconds later in the shadowy confines of a city alley. Donning the disguise mask, Zhou ensures his appearance and nickname remain hidden, entering a new alias into the system. Don't mess with the crows. The system promptly confirms the nickname update, and with that done, Zhou decides to head home without drawing further attention to himself. While walking, he notices a woman nearby, none other than Yaya, who appears to be persuading a young girl with a rare profession to join her guild. Transforming into a crow, Zhou flies high above Yaya, observing as she waves goodbye to the girl, advising her to contact her later if she changes her mind. Watching Yaya slip into a secluded alley, Zhou decides to follow her silently, intrigued by what she might be planning. Moving further into the shadows, Yaya removes her outer cloak, revealing an intricate scorpion tattoo. Startled by the sight, Zhou instinctively lets out a sharp caw. Hearing the sudden noise, Yaya spins around cautiously, mid-change, and demands to know who dares to spy on her. Seeing no one in sight, she warily returns her focus to dressing, though her assassin instincts leave her feeling the distinct presence of unseen eyes. Zhou, now certain of Yaya's identity as a fellow assassin, feels a surge of surprise at her true nature. Moments later, Yaya completes her transformation, her attire now reflecting her status as a peak second-grade level 40 assassin, as revealed by the system. Exiting the alley in her assassin's guise, Yaya strides forward, unaware that Zhou continues to trail her from above. After some time, Yaya's transmitter beeps, notifying her of a response from the girl she had tried to recruit earlier. Through a video call, the girl, who introduces herself as S0L0 informs Yaya of her decision to join the Scorpion Guild, prompting Yaya to arrange an immediate meeting. Remaining in his crow form, Zhou watches as Yaya whistles in apparent delight, celebrating her success and luring the unsuspecting girl into her web. Zhou arrives at the Yoni Ming Specialty Hotel just in time to witness S0L0 collapse lifelessly to the floor, her vitality seemingly drained. Licking her finger with a smirk, Yaya coldly remarks that the world has too many rare professionals, and to maintain balance, some must be removed. Slamming the door shut behind her, Yaya leaves the lifeless S0L0 behind. Watching from outside the window, Zhou feels a wave of shock as he pieces together Yaya's sinister plan to eliminate rare professionals and realizes he could have been her target. Fearing for his sister's safety, he frantically pulls out his phone and dials her number, his mind racing with worry. Meanwhile, Xingyu, Zhou's sister, is relaxing at a hot spring, enjoying a carefree moment with her friend Xiaoyu. The sudden ringing of Xingyu's phone startles both girls, but Xiaoyu protests, grabbing Xingyu's arm and insisting she ignore it. Xingyu points out that the call is from her brother, Zhou, and that it might be important, but Xiaoyu pouts, complaining that Zhou can't seem to live without his sister. Unfazed, Xiaoyu throws a playful tantrum, declaring that since it's her birthday, she won't allow Xingyu to be distracted by anyone or anything. With their faces close, Xingyu teases Xiaoyu by gently touching her lips, asking why she seems so jealous of her brother. As the two girls revel in carefree joy, Zhou anxiously dials his sister's number, met only with silence. Determined to ensure his sister's safety, Zhou takes flight, pursuing Yaya relentlessly as she speeds off in her car. His pursuit leads him to the White Emperor City's most affluent neighborhood, where, hovering just above the ground, he spies Yaya meeting with an odd-looking man, their behavior erratic and unsettling. Once seated, Zhao Jun scolds Yaya for recklessly eliminating rare players, warning it has drawn by Zheng's attention. Perched discreetly on a tree branch, Zhou keenly eavesdrops on their conversation and uncovers that they are part of a sinister cult. With a sharp gesture, Zhao Jun demands to know why Yaya is targeting newly awakened rare professionals, and what this has to do with locating the enigmatic Death Star. Yaya suggests the Death Star is likely among the 12 rare newcomers, noting one obtained the legendary Forbidden Chest. Zhou is struck with sudden realization as he understands that he is the very target of the cult's pursuit. Intrigued, Zhao Jun asks about the cult's obsession with Death Star, and Yaya reveals they see it as key to reviving the Lord of the End. Adding her personal ambition, Yaya declares that she doesn't care about their Lord's resurrection and is solely interested in the forbidden treasure chest for herself. Zhao Jun is momentarily taken aback, his thoughts swirling with the potential power the forbidden treasure chest holds, capable of unlocking legendary artifacts. Secretly, he plots to seize the forbidden treasure chest for himself, vowing to eliminate both Death Star and Yaya to solidify his own dominance. Maintaining a facade of calm, calm, he probes Yaya further, asking if she has uncovered any clues about Death Star's whereabouts. Yaya smirks, pulling out a picture of Zhou, placing it on the table, and confidently stating her suspicion that he is the elusive Death Star. Seeing his own image in their hands, Zhou is rattled to his core, unable to fathom how Yaya managed to uncover his identity. Examining the photo, Zhao Jun scoffs, commenting that Zhou doesn't appear particularly remarkable, but Yaya retorts, pointing out his immunity to her charm skills. Zhao Jun nods, feigning agreement, and suggests they should start by interrogating Zhou's sister to confirm their theory. Zhou's fury ignites as he listens to their vile plan to harm his sister, a blazing determination sparking within him. Suddenly, a forceful attack strikes the tree Zhou is perched upon, forcing him to launch into the air to evade the assault. Standing poised, Yaya glares at Zhou, her voice sharp as she accuses the crow of tailing her for some time. Seizing the distraction, Zhao Jun subtly raises his hand, activating his tower shield skill, summoning a radiant barrier to trap both himself and Yaya in a secluded battle zone. Nearby, two patrolling men, likely law enforcers, hear the commotion, but one dismisses the noise as insignificant. The tower shield, a formidable ability, creates an isolated combat arena impervious to outside interference, its effects lingering for 30 minutes. Yaya, her stance tense, questions Zhao Jun's betrayal, to which he bluntly responds that his only interest lies in acquiring the forbidden treasure chest. A sly grin stretches across Yaya's face as she activates a special skill, taunting Zhao Jun and questioning how he could possibly hope to defeat her. As their battle escalates into chaos, Zhou decides to distance himself, knowing the crossfire could prove disastrous if he lingers. Yaya unleashes a devastating attack toward Zhao Jun, but he counters with his fearless golden body skill, morphing his form into an impenetrable shield to absorb the impact. Dark energy crackles around Yaya's hand as she raises it, channeling another powerful strike. Employing her assassin skills, she conjures multiple of clones, each armed with deadly daggers, charging at Zhao Jun in unison. Gritting his teeth, Zhao Jun stomps the ground with immense force, fracturing the terrain and sending shockwaves rippling toward Yaya, who leaps nimbly to evade. Zhou, watching from a safe distance, thinks that Yaya is really strong. As Yaya lands, Zhao Jun, now wielding a massive blade, rushes at her with a feral sneer. Yaya charges to meet him head-on, her dagger gleaming as she grips it tightly. Their weapons clash with explosive force, sparks illuminating their fierce battle, their every strike an embodiment of skill and tenacity. Yaya darts forward, attempting to pierce Zhao Jun's defenses, but he counters, grabbing her mid-air and halting her momentum. As their fierce struggle continues, Zhou seizes the opportunity to intervene, unleashing a storm of 72 razor-sharp feathers aimed directly at them, while Zhao Jun dashes forward, startled by the unexpected assault. Confused, Zhao Jun wonders whether the crow is merely Yaya's pet or something more. Amidst the chaos, a single feather strikes Yaya, its immobilizing effect taking hold and freezing her in place for 10 crucial seconds. Seeing Yaya immobilized, Zhao Jun swiftly turns around, his lips curling into a wicked grin as he charges at her with his sword raised. His sword strikes Yaya's outfit, which shimmers as the protective armor beneath it takes a direct hit, reducing its durability by 50% in an instant. Just as the immobilization effect wears off, Yaya regains control and grabs Zhao Jun's sword with her bare hand, her eyes gleaming with defiance. Taking advantage of their close distance, Yaya counters with a ferocious slash of her dagger, delivering massive damage that sends Zhao Jun hurtling backward. Hovering in the air, Zhou watches the swift and terrifying display of Yaya's abilities, stunned by her speed and power. Dagger aimed at battered Zhao Jun, Yaya accuses him of spying with the crow and demands how long he's plotted against the church. Zhao Jun, his voice filled with rage, retorts that he was forced to collude with the church only because they threaten the safety of the Zhao family's children. Overhearing their heated argument, Zhou pieces together that Yaya mistakenly believes he is Zhao Jun's pet. With a sly smirk, Yaya declares her intention to use her charm, while Zhao Jun, equally amused, reminds her that her charm skill only works on players. Undeterred, Yaya states she has no interest in charming Zhao Jun but intends to charm the crow instead, prompting Zhou to pretend he has been enchanted. Believing Zhou is now under her control, Yaya commands him to attack Zhao Jun, and Zhou obliges by launching sharp feathers that Zhao Jun deflects. However, one feather manages to pierce through and immobilizes Zhao Jun, leaving him vulnerable for a crucial 10 seconds. Seizing the opportunity, Yaya lunges at Zhao Jun, her dagger striking his armor with precision and reducing its durability by another 30%. Suddenly, Zhou ascends higher into the air and rains down another flurry of feathers at Yaya, forcing her to leap aside, baffled by the crow's unexpected betrayal. With a confident grin, Zhao Jun reiterates that Yaya's charm skill is ineffective against anything other than players. Undeterred, Undeterred, Yaya and Zhao Jun charge at each other again, their determination unwavering as they prepare for another fierce clash. From his vantage point above, Zhou, resolute in his decision to finish them both, unleashes another barrage of feathers aimed directly at the combatants. Meanwhile, at the Zhao family's main estate, Lord Bai arrives urgently, seeking an audience with Mr. Zhao, only to be told by a caretaker that Mr. Zhao is currently occupied. Their conversation is interrupted as the ground beneath them begins to tremble violently, leaving both men startled. Looking toward the nearby forest, they witness a massive streak of white light erupting into the sky like a laser, its brilliance leaving them awestruck. Back at the battlefield, Zhao Jun and Yaya remain locked in a relentless confrontation, neither showing any sign of backing down. Spotting an opening, Zhou sends another cascade of feathers hurtling down toward the duo, determined to tip the scales of the battle. In a dramatic turn, Zhou transforms back into his human form mid-air, summoning his sword and activating a skill that amplifies his damage output. Immobilized by Zhou's earlier attack, Yaya and Zhao Jun are left defenseless as they stare in horror at the masked figure descending upon them. With a mighty swing of his sword, Zhou unleashes a cataclysmic explosion that obliterates the ground beneath them, sending trees and debris soaring into the sky as a pillar of radiant energy ascends. Landing on the ground and pulling down his mask, Zhou peers into the massive crater left by his strike, wondering if it was enough to finish his opponents. Clinging desperately to the edge of the crater, Zhao Jun, though gravely injured, survives thanks to the protection granted by his enchanted necklace. From his precarious position, he looks up at Zhou, his mind racing as he realizes that such a powerful attack could only come from someone at least level 80 or higher. Yaya, equally battered, lies sprawled on the ground. Suddenly, Lord Bai arrives on the scene and quickly casts a skill called Heavenly Barrier, summoning a vast, circular void prison capable of locking down all attribute professions. With a grin, Zhou activates his 10 steps, one fatal strike combo, slashing his sword 10 times in a zigzag pattern that shatters the heavenly barrier with ease. Staring in disbelief at the broken barrier, Lord Bai's mouth falls open as he struggles to comprehend Zhou's overwhelming power. Pointing his sword at Lord Bai, Zhou accuses him of aiding a member of the Church of the End and demands to know if he is secretly aligned with the cult. Shocked by the accusation, Lord Bai stammers out a denial while Zhao Jun tries to play innocent, running toward him in a desperate bid for protection. Directing his sword toward Yaya, who is attempting to flee, Zhou reveals her identity as the poisonous scorpion, the one responsible for eliminating 3 rare profession players. Turning to Zhao Jun, Lord Bai sternly demands an explanation for Yaya's presence and questions his connection to her. Dropping to his hands and knees, Zhao Jun grovels before Lord Bai, begging for forgiveness and admitting his greed led him to side with the wrong people. Shifting his attention to Yaya, Lord Bai asks if she has anything to say in her defense. With an icy glare, Yaya hisses her admission, taking full responsibility for targeting the rare profession players without a hint of remorse. Before anyone can react, Yaya activates the Void Seal, a high-level skill effect that triggers an immediate teleportation to a safe location. Realizing her escape plan, Lord Bai swiftly conjures Void Spheres, aiming to trap her within their explosive containment field. As the Void Spheres erupt with tremendous force upon impact, Zhou seizes the opportunity to revert into his crow form, swiftly disappearing into the night sky. Observing Zhou vanish in an instant, both Lord Bai and Zhao Jun are left perplexed. Meanwhile, Yaya reappears in the dimly lit alley, her frustration spilling out as she curses her pursuers for interfering with her plans. Suddenly, she notices a bird-shaped shadow cast on the ground beneath a street lamp and, startled, spins around to find Zhou perched above her, glaring down with piercing eyes. Shocked, she demands to know why Zhou is relentlessly chasing her and questions if he is working in tandem with Zhao Jun. With a cold edge to his voice, Zhou declares he despises anyone meddling in his affairs and, soaring upward, unleashes a volley of enchanted feathers aimed directly at her, forcing her to flee. At Zhou's apartment, his half-asleep sister Xingyu stares at 3 untouched plates, wondering why he hasn't returned home. As she mutters to herself, a knock resounds at the door, and thinking it might be Zhou, Xingyu gets up to answer it, her exhaustion evident. The moment she opens the door, Zhou collapses against her, sending her tumbling to the ground as he falls unconscious, his strength completely spent. That night, while deep in slumber, Zhou is haunted by a vivid nightmare where a shadowy villain forces him to choose between saving his sister or Qingyu. Desperately reaching out for both girls, Zhou shouts that he cannot abandon either and rushes forward, the anguish etched across his face. In his sleepwalking state, Zhou unknowingly wanders into Xingyu's room, startling her awake as she finds him standing there in a daze. Mistaking his actions as something inappropriate, Xingyu angrily accuses Zhou of attempting to take advantage of her. Before Zhou can respond, Xiaoyu bursts into the room, assumes the worst, and sternly commands them to join her down downstairs for breakfast. Misreading the tension, Xiaoyu feels triumphant, thinking they're bonding, while Zhou and Xingyu exchange looks of disdain. Crossing her arms with a haughty expression, Xingyu mocks Zhou, calling him a crybaby who sleepwalks, while Zhou warns her to stop provoking him. Eventually, they descend to the dining hall, where they begin breakfast, and Xingyu pointedly asks Zhou why he arrived so late the previous night. Ignoring her question, Zhou counters by demanding to know why Xingyu did not answer his numerous calls, his tone sharp with suspicion. Attempting to divert the conversation, Xingyu offers Zhou a piece of chicken, her demeanor shifting to an awkward cheerfulness. With a steely gaze, Zhou persists, questioning what the two of them were doing the previous night and why they ignored his calls. Hesitating slightly, Xingyu looks flustered while Xiaoyu replies that they were merely discussing battle tactics for their shared guild missions. Skeptical, Zhou presses further, asking what kind of secret realm could warrant such an extended strategy session through the night. Both girls respond simultaneously, revealing the name of the mysterious domain, Shadow of the Black Sun. Xingyu explains that the Shadow of the Black Sun is an exceptionally large secret realm, 5 times the size of typical realms, teeming with formidable monsters and ruled by a level 45 boss. Xiaoyu interjects, revealing survivors believe the Corpse King might be a decoy for an even greater hidden threat. Intrigued, Zhou asks if this means a hidden boss exists within the realm, adding that since the boss remains undefeated, the rewards must still be unclaimed. Sensing Zhou's growing interest, Xingyu warns him sternly not to entertain any thoughts of entering such a perilous place. When Zhou attempts to argue, Xingyu ruffles his hair, calling him reckless and promising to bring back treasures for him instead. Xiaoyu scoffs at the idea, declaring she will never allow their hard-earned rewards to go to someone as immature as Zhou. Ignoring their bickering, Zhou becomes fixated on the Shadow of the Black Sun, silently vowing to claim the hidden treasures and unravel its mysteries. Elsewhere, in Zhao Jun's office, a mysterious hooded figure named Scorpio appears behind him and announces that Yaya has been defeated, leaving her position vacant. Hearing this news, Zhao Jun freezes in disbelief, his expression pale as fear grips him. Rising from his chair and donning his coat, Zhao Jun demands to know how Yaya could have been defeated when she escaped unscathed earlier. With a sinister smirk, Scorpio reveals that an unknown but immensely powerful individual was responsible, someone even capable of bypassing the Void Seal's defenses. With a swift motion, Scorpio announces his departure, turning to leave, but not before informing Zhao Jun that he will notify him if any future missions arise. Alone in the dim room, Zhao Jun stands in stunned silence, grappling with the shock that Yaya is dead. His fury erupts as he slams his fists onto the table, his face twisted in rage, convinced that the mysterious swordsman behind the crater is also tied to this tragedy. Just then door bursts open, and Zhao Ziming, his eldest son, enters with a stern look, warning that despite the Zhao family's distance from the city lord and church, the swordsman's threat still looms. Zhao Jun's frustration erupts, veins throbbing with rage as he orders Zhao Ziming to gather their forces and find the man who can transform into a crow. Meanwhile, deep within the treacherous level 45 secret realm, the Shadow of the Black Sun, Xingyu and Xiaoyu are locked in a fierce and unrelenting battle against swarms of monstrous foes. Xiaoyu channels her power to summon a torrent of swirling water, sending several creatures hurtling away in the rushing current. However, her determined expression shifts to concern as she watches Xingyu get struck by a monster's blow, sending her crashing into the rugged ground below. Wasting no time, Xiaoyu casts another spell, unleashing a second powerful wave of water to drive the monsters away from Xingyu's fallen form. At that moment, Zhou appears on the battlefield, his identity concealed by a sleek mask, and with a graceful yet deadly swing of his blade, he clears the remaining creatures threatening Xingyu. As the monsters retreat, Zhou reassures Xingyu that she is safe for now, while Xingyu gazes at him in bewilderment, her thoughts swirling with questions. Zhou quickly realizes that Xingyu has not recognized him, thanks to the mask obscuring his face. Xingyu grins, impressed by the masked warrior's strength, secretly wondering if she could convince him to mentor her brother. Zhou. Before she can voice her thoughts, Xiaoyu rushes to her side, her voice frantic with concern as she checks if Xingyu is hurt. Suddenly, a notification from the system informs Zhou that a player named Little Witch has sent him a staggering sum of 999,999 coins. Taken aback by such an immense offering, Zhou hesitates briefly, unsure of whether to accept the unexpected generosity. In a swift motion, he dashes past Xingyu, who is mid-sentence, and thanking him, and their eyes meet for a fleeting moment, leaving Xingyu captivated by the familiarity of the masked warrior's gaze. Zhou urgently pulls Xingyu behind him, as the ground trembles with the approach of hundreds of monsters charging toward them. From a distance, Xiaoyu cries out in panic, warning Xingyu to stay alert as the monstrous horde barrels closer. closer with unrelenting ferocity. Zhou's eyes ignite with an electric glow, and he raises his crackling blade, preparing to unleash the devastating technique known as the 10 steps, 1 fatal strike. A colossal dome of explosive energy materializes in an instant, consuming the oncoming monsters in a dazzling yet destructive wave that clears the battlefield. As the dust settles, Xiaoyu approaches Zhou, offering her gratitude for saving Xingyu while reminding him that the gold coins she sent earlier were merely tokens of her appreciation. Zhou humbly thanks Xiaoyu for her kindness but insists that the coins are far too generous for his liking. Before Zhou can continue, Xiaoyu abruptly grabs Xingyu by the arm and drags her away, her demeanor determined as if to shield Xingyu from Zhou's lingering presence. Xingyu, running beside Xiaoyu, protests in confusion, urging her not to leave before learning the stranger's name, but Xiaoyu dismisses the idea. Left alone, Zhou decides to scout other areas within the shadow of the Black Sun, leaping high into the air with an acrobatic flourish and gliding away. Elsewhere, in Area B of the shadow of the Black Sun, a group of adventurers is surrounded by a relentless horde of monsters, forcing them into a desperate defensive circle. The knights, their shields raised to block the encroaching beasts, suggest a retreat, but Zimming vehemently refuses, his pride burning as he declares their mission far from over. With a commanding gesture, Zimming channels his power and strikes a nearby monster with a bolt of crackling lightning. One of the knights, struggling to hold back the tide, asks how they intend to secure scouts to map the area, given their precarious situation. Zimming retorts with a daring suggestion to recruit, or rather, borrow, scouts from rival guilds, which earns agreement from the knight. As another wave of monsters approaches, Zimming unleashes a barrage of energy blades shaped like glowing rings, slicing through the horde with deadly precision. High above, Zhou, in his crow form, soars through the air, his keen eyes locking onto the embattled Zimming and his struggling party below. Without hesitation, Zhou releases a flurry of 72 radiant feathers, which rain down upon the battlefield like meteoric projectiles, striking monsters and adventurers alike. The feathers paralyze dozens of enemies, freezing them in place for 10 critical seconds, effectively tipping the scales of the battle. One monster, mere moments from striking Zimming, is also immobilized by the radiant feather, leaving Zimming utterly stunned. Next up, Zhou activates the Heavenly Barrier, a legendary skill that creates an impenetrable field, sealing 100% of the enemy's attributes. Immediately, a colossal dome of crackling energy descends onto the battlefield, encapsulating both the monsters and players within it. Caught in the barrier's force, Zimming is frozen, his eyes wide with astonishment as he realizes the swordsman can wield magic. Building on the momentum of his first move, Zhou unleashes the corpse flame, raining torrents of blazing infernal fire upon the trapped enemies like an unrelenting storm. Still locked in place, Zimming's mind races with confirmation that the formidable crow is indeed the swordsman his father tasked him to eliminate. As the barrier finally dissipates, Zhou glides through the air toward a nearby tree, landing gracefully on a branch. Zimming approaches with cautious optimism, proposing an alliance and offering Zhou a position in his guild to conquer the shadow of the Black Sun together. Without hesitation, Zhou rejects the offer, his tone sharp and resolute, making it clear he has no interest in working alongside anyone. Determined, Zimming raises the stakes, promising Zhou a hefty reward of 200,000 gold coins if he agrees to join the guild. Before Zhou can respond, the dark clouds behind him swirl with ominous energy, crackling with lightning, prompting him to leap from the branch and ascend swiftly. As he soars through the air beneath the brewing storm, Zhou feels the MOU ring in his possession begin to radiate an intense, searing heat. Out of nowhere, a massive palm hurtles toward Zhou, forcing him to leap aside just in time to avoid its crushing blow. As the hand soars past Zhou, he spots a round void lingering in the sky, a little distance away. The ground trembles as the palm slams into it, leaving behind a massive crater, a testament to its destructive power. Drawing closer to the void, Zhou receives a system notification instructing him to present the MOU ring to awaken the final boss. Heeding the system's advice, Zhou reveals the ring, triggering an eerie reaction within the void, from which Situya, the level 50 queen of the Black Sun, emerges wielding a fearsome blade. Her piercing gaze locks onto Zhou as she raises her hand, channeling dark energy into an attack known as the Heavenly Fire, an assault imbued with unrelenting fury. With a commanding gesture, she unleashes a cascade of blazing flames, each wave racing toward Zhou with deadly precision. Zhou maneuvers skillfully through the inferno, zigzagging through the air to evade the flames, while simultaneously launching razor-sharp feathers to divert her focus. Closing the distance between them with incredible speed, Zhou takes advantage of the queen's momentary distraction and activates the God's Hand skill, skill. Realizing something has been taken from her, the queen's voice erupts in fury as she demands to know what Zhou has stolen, hurling another wave of hellfire in retaliation. The searing flames detonate in front of Zhou, forcing him to ascend higher into the skies, narrowly escaping their devastating heat. Creating further distance, Zhou counters by releasing another barrage of his enchanted feathers, targeting the queen. Struck by one of the feathers, the queen is paralyzed for 10 seconds, providing Zhou with a critical opening to gain the upper hand. Transforming back into his human form, Zhou charges at the immobilized queen, his sword raised high, radiating the deadly energy of an impending strike. With a single swing, Zhou executes the Void Slash, a move that rends the fabric of reality, delivering devastating void damage upon the queen. Unable to resist due to her immobilized state, the queen absorbs the full force of the attack. As the paralysis fades, it becomes evident the queen has been defeated, granting Zhou enough experience to level up to 40. Returning to his crow form, Zhou gracefully descends to the ground, landing effortlessly before shifting back into his human form. Turning back, he is startled to see the queen still standing, and with confusion in his voice, he demands to know why she hasn't disappeared after her defeat. Smiling slyly, the queen reveals her immunity, claiming she is protected by the Dawn's blessing, which prevents her from being vanquished, and demands Zhou surrender the ring to her. When Zhou questions whether this is a threat, the queen affirms it with an unwavering glare. With a flick of his wrist, Zhou summons glowing chains infused with ethereal energy, declaring he has no choice but to resort to this forbidden skill. Sensing danger, the queen hesitates, her tone betraying a hint of fear as she asks what Zhou intends to do. Without warning, Zhou hurls the chains forward, their radiant energy wrapping tightly around the queen's form and binding her completely. Struggling against the unyielding chains, the queen attempts to flee, but Zhou tightens his grip, forcing her to kneel under their immense pressure. As she collapses, Zhou approaches, gripping her face and commanding that she belongs to him. That was the story for today. Guys, you can tell us in the comments which story would like us to continue, or you can also watch this next video.